Hey, how's it going? My name is JC, and today we're going to talk about the uncomfortable truth about building muscle after cancer. Now, I'm clinical exercise physiologist and a cancer exercise specialist. I've run research trials in exercise oncology for the University of Yale or Yale University and the University of Miami. Now, when it comes to building muscle, we're going to talk about how much muscle you can actually build, how to properly build muscle, what the expectations you should have when it comes to building muscle, and why it's important. So let's start with why it's important first. Now, when you're going through cancer treatment itself causes you to decondition your body very quickly. There's two things going on. There is the effect that cancer treatment has on your body, which stops you from moving, right? And that stopping you from moving or that physical inactivity literally speeds up the process, which is just the muscle wasting process. There's also the effect it has on your nutrition. So if you eat less calories, you don't have that much energy. So your body's going to go tap into fat first. Once it runs out of fat and it starts going into this preservation mode, then it starts tapping into your muscle next. So you have that deconditioning effect from the cancer treatment stopping you from moving. Then you have the malnutrition effect, and you have the cancer therapies themselves, which your body's fighting all three of those at the same time. And all that creates sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle function, strength, and size. And it could lead to cachexia, which is that severe muscle wasting. Now, this doesn't happen to everyone. Not everyone gets cachexia, but muscle loss happens, I would say, in most cancer survivors. Even in cancer survivors who gain weight, they're not gaining muscle. They're gaining mostly fat and losing muscle. And what we call that scientifically is, I completely forgot the word off the top of my head. Sarcopenic obesity. I don't know why it popped in my head now, but it causes what's called sarcopenic obesity, which means that you lose muscle and you gain fat. That is probably the worst state to be in, other than in severe muscle loss, because now your body has a bunch of fat to deal with and not enough muscle to handle it. So losing fat's very hard, gaining muscle is very hard. Your physical intolerance is also very hard, and it can be very tricky to see when you're suffering from sarcopenic obesity. So now, that being said, most cancer survivors who go through treatment have some form of muscle loss. If you've lost weight, more than 5 pounds per se, or more than 5% of your body weight, then you've for sure had muscle loss. Now, if you've gained a lot of fat, you've probably lost muscle too. Even though you can't tell by the scale, the likelihood is pretty high that you lost muscle and just gained fat throughout that time. And in many cancer survivors, maybe they weigh the same, but what they notice is that they weigh the same, but they look fluffier, as somebody once told me. They're like, I just look fluffier because they've lost muscle and just gained fat. So it happens to many cancer survivors, and let's talk about how to properly build muscle. Now, there's different factors that will determine how much muscle you build. So, for example, your age, your gender, the cancer treatment, your nutrition, your genetics, the program that you're going to do, and your sleep all impact how much muscle you build. Now, out of all those things, there's only one thing that can help you build muscle. It's not your nutrition, it's not your sleep, and it's not your genetics. The only thing that will cause muscle gain is weight training. That's the only thing. You cannot eat your way to build muscle. Now, eating a good nutrition, eating enough protein helps with building muscle, but if you don't lift weights, you can eat all the protein you want. You're not going to build muscle. You have to do weightlifting to build muscle. So make sure to get that in your head. Otherwise, you're just basically peeing the extra protein out because you're not using it. You have to break the muscle down, eat the protein to then build it back up. The only driver for muscle gain, I'll say it one more time, is to lift weights, do some form of resistance training. Some programs are going to be better than others. So, isometric exercises, meaning exercises that you just hold in that same position, are not great for building muscle. Quick exercises where you combine multiple exercises at the same time, like a shoulder press and I don't know, a squat, for example. Terrible exercise for building muscle. Exercises that don't have any stability to them, like being on a Bosu ball while you're doing bicep curls, bad exercise for building muscle. So there are certain exercises that are way better than others for building muscle. Now, are you still going to build muscle? Yeah, just not as much as you could be, right? So that's important to know. Not all exercises give you the same results when it comes to muscle building. It doesn't mean it's a bad exercise. It just means that your exercise needs to match your goals. And today's goal is building muscle after cancer. So I don't want you to waste your time at the gym doing all these random workouts when you have fatigue, you have a serious disease that you're fighting, you're tired, you have a life ahead of you, and you want to maximize as much as you can for your health. I don't want you to waste your time. That's why I got into this career, is to make sure that somebody who needs the help gets the help that they um, actually want and need for their bodies. So when it comes to the best exercises to build muscle, it's going to be your machines. Machines have the lowest barrier of entry because you just look at the machine, read what it says, maybe click on a little video, and you know how to do it. All right. It's going to hold you in place and it's going to maximize how much effort you put into that machine because there's only one way to move. Now, the risk of injury is lower, not for all machines. For example, a Smith machine is different, but for like a leg extension, a leg curl, things like that, lower risk of injury. And you're going to be able to really put in the most energy to that one movement. Now, other than that, it's going to be any exercise that has some form of stability to it. So, for example, a lunge, great exercise, but you want to hold on to something. Hold on to something because you're trying to maximize how much energy or how much you're using that single muscle. You don't want to be working on your balance while you're trying to build muscle. Hold on to something and do the exercise. So, other exercises are compound exercises, exercises that target multiple muscle groups at the same time because you're building full body muscle. So you want to pair up a good routine that has compound lifts and isolated lifts. Compound lifts, think about like a shotgun. A shotgun, if you shoot it, it's going to go all over the place, right? So when you do a compound lift, like a squat, deadlift, pull up, hip hinge, right? All those exercises, you're working on multiple muscle groups. So your energy is being dispersed throughout your body. You're targeting your glutes a little bit, your core a little bit, your abs a little bit, everything. It's like you're investing in an index fund, right? Where you're putting your money in and it's going throughout all these different little stocks, right? Now, isolated exercises are ones that really hone in and focus on one specific area. You want to do both of those, and that's like investing in one specific stock or um, like a pistol. It's very precise. It's or a sniper. I don't know, something that's very precise to the area that you're trying to grow. As a cancer survivor, you really want to isolate your thighs, glutes, and back. Those are the ones that you want to make sure you're strengthening the most because your thighs, you need to be able to walk, get up from a chair, get up and off the toilet for the rest of your life. That's your independence machine. It's your legs. Your back and your glutes because you want to make sure you're standing up straight, you have good posture, and you don't hurt yourself in the future. Those are exercises that you want to maximize as much as you want. So using machines and compound lifts for those areas is very smart and wise to do. Now, you don't have to do both of them in one session. So, for example, maybe you might do a squat, right? A body weight squat, and then you might do some leg curls in one session. And then the next session, you do a deadlift and then you do a leg extension. You don't have to do squat, deadlift, leg press, leg extension all in one routine because that would be very tiresome. You could. That is a great leg day. Depends on your goals, depends what you're trying to do, but that would be very tiresome. If you love lifting, great routine. I recommend that. But it's going to be better in terms of energy wise, especially if you have fatigue, to separate those bigger lifts into different days. Now, instead of compounds and isolated exercises for different body parts, maybe your shoulders, your core, you want to focus more on the isolated areas. So, what I mean by that is on your shoulders, for example, or your core, for example. Building muscle in those areas is going to require some form of compound movement because you want to target the most muscle groups as you can. So a shoulder press with dumbbells is going to be great for building muscle mass in your shoulders. But isolated or targeted exercises are going to be great for shoulder health, right? Because then you can really target, for example, the rotator cuff. You can really target your rhomboids, your upper back. You can really target a stretch, especially if you had surgery. So using those isolated workouts for your shoulders, arms, core, it's going to be great to reduce risk of injury and help you recover faster so you can start including those more compound lifts for smaller muscle groups. So generally, I always recommend starting with isolated for smaller muscle groups or for areas that you've had surgery. Once you get a good strength and stability in the weaker areas, then you can do the compound lifts and start focusing on building muscle in those areas. But only once you have a good amount of strength and a good amount of stability before you do the compound lifts. So I don't recommend just starting with compound lifts for somewhere that you've had surgery, that's weaker, or that's had previous injury before. It's really all about isolated, really targeted exercises. And then you can focus on building muscle. So we've talked about programming, we've talked about different factors, we've talked about why it's good to build muscle. Now let's talk about how much muscle can you actually build. Okay, so there's lots of different factors that I mentioned earlier in the video, and I'm gonna go one by one. Okay, so your gender is gonna be one of the biggest determinants of how much muscle you build. If you are male, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, you're able to build more muscle just by genetics of male or female alone. And that tends to do more with hormones, right? So females tend to build less muscle than males. So keep that in mind. If a male, for example, can build, let's say, 10 to 12 pounds of muscle in a year, a female might only be able to build 6 to 8 pounds of muscle in a year. Maybe 10 if she has elite genetic potentials. So keep in mind that male and females obviously have very different genetic potential for how much muscle they can build. The second thing is now diving deeper into genetics, your true genetic potential for building muscle. Some people can look at a weight and build muscle like that. Some people, I'm one of them, who can lift for a long time and they don't really build that much muscle. Not everyone has built enough not everyone has enough built-in genetic potential to put on a ton of muscle mass. That doesn't mean you can't build muscle. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try to build muscle. It just means that for the same amount of effort, two people are going to have two very different responses. So if I put 15 cancer survivors in the same workout program, some people are going to gain a ton of muscle, some people are not going to gain that much, and some people might even lose muscle throughout that workout plan. Hence why it's so important to have an individualized workout plan throughout your cancer treatment and after if you're serious about building muscle. Because I work with cancer survivors all the time and they all do this Orange Theory, F45 or whatever. They end up getting more fat, losing more muscle because it's not designed for them. Yes, they're exercising and that's good, But medically speaking, you need three things: cardio, strength, and muscle. You need to be building those three things, and you got to clinically, with exercise, build muscle specifically for your body. Now that I've said that rant, um, let's dive deeper into why everyone responds differently. Number one, cancer treatment. Not as every single person is going to have a different response to cancer treatment. So some people feel nausea, some people feel fatigue, some people get mouth sores. The side effect that you feel from cancer treatment itself is going to greatly impact your overall health. If somebody has mouth sores, they're more prone to malnutrition, which is going to impact how much protein and carbs they eat, and it will ultimately impact how much muscle they can gain, for example. And it's going to impact how much energy they have. So, how much energy they put into the gym is going to be less than somebody who doesn't struggle with that. So, cancer treatment alone has a big impact. Your genetic potential has a big impact. Some people can build more muscle than others, some people are going to build less. Once again, this is not to say you shouldn't be trying to build muscle. This is just to say every single person is going to have a different response to the same routine. So, it does need to be individualized. Now, sleep is another thing that will impact how much muscle you can gain. So, if you have less sleep, less than 6 hours, you're basically tanking how much muscle you can gain. If you have 7, 8, or 9 hours of sleep, that is like the perfect routine for building more muscle. So, think about it this way. Let's assume we have person A, person B. They're both male, they're both the same age, they both eat the same amount of protein, they both have a program individualized to them that's going to help them build muscle. But person A, gets 4 hours of sleep. Person B gets 8 hours of sleep. Person B is going to build more muscle than person A because they had better sleep. Sleep is basically where you allow your body to recover, rebuild, and re-flourish again. That is what sleep is. It's a great form of recovery, and recovery is incredible for building muscle. Once again, this is challenging for cancer survivors. Many cancer survivors have insomnia, trouble with sleeping, trouble falling asleep, trouble getting enough hours of sleep, trouble waking up in and out of the night. So there's a lot of challenges that comes with building muscle if you have trouble sleeping. So generally what I like to do for my online coaching clients is before we get into a muscle building phase, we work on improving the quality of their sleep. There's still strength training because they're going to build some muscle with strength training. They're still doing their cardio, but we're looking for more targeted meditation, some nighttime habits to help them improve their sleep. And you can improve your sleep with sleep quality, sleep latency. So, depending on how fast you fall asleep, that's improvement to your sleep. So, how long you sleep is another good one. And how much of deep sleep you get is another great measure of improving your sleep. You're not always going to experience all of them at once. You might experience that you fall asleep faster before you have longer nights of sleep. That's improvement to your sleep, and that's really, really good. So, sleep quality is something that's very important. You're still going to be building muscle throughout the time, but the better your sleep is, the more muscle you're going to build. Okay. We talked about programming already. Now let's talk about nutrition. If somebody gets more protein, protein is going to be extremely important for building muscle. However, in the literature, specifically for cancer survivors, I have not seen protein intake increase how much muscle you can build, which is interesting because we don't see that in people who have not had cancer before. Generally, if you have people who've not had cancer and they exercise, everything's the same and they eat more protein, they build more muscle than somebody who didn't get more protein. But in cancer survivors specifically, we don't see that effect. And we think it's because there's an amount of threshold of how much muscle has been lost that just exercising alone without getting enough protein is going to help you just build muscle, period. So that's to a degree an advantage because you got one less thing to focus on. That being said, I still recommend getting between 60 to 70 to 100 to 120 grams of protein a day. If that sounds like a crazy number, I understand. I'll have another podcast talking about how to make sure you're hitting those targets. But the reason I recommend that is because getting enough protein, yes, is going to help with muscle recovery, with your cells. It also helps with hormones. It also helps with your white blood cells, red blood cells, immune system. Protein is an essential for overall health and wellness in your body, and you need enough protein. So I still recommend getting your protein, even though it has yet to be shown to be, an extra benefit for building muscle itself. And lastly, I think I've already mentioned this, but your age. The younger you are, the more muscle you're going to be able to build. The older, the less muscle you're going to be able to build. Now, something that I actually forgot to mention is the time of training. And this is really, really good for you, especially if you've never lifted before, or if you are just recently got diagnosed with cancer and you haven't exercised for over a year, or you want to get started to build muscle. The less time you have in training, the more benefit you're actually going to get. So this is a advantage that you have, is that when you're first starting to exercise, you're going to get the most amount of muscle. As you exercise longer, the amount of muscle you're going to be able to build is less and less over time. It's just an adaptation that the body has, basically, that limits from how much muscle you can gain. So, for example, an advanced bodybuilder, to give you an extreme case, is only going to be able to build maybe 1 or 2% in a year. Somebody who just started lifting can build 30 to 40% of muscle in a year. Like, it's a significant difference. So in that time period, we call it newbie gains. You want to make sure that you're doing the most to actually build muscle. If you've been frequently training your whole life, you're probably going to have a little bit harder time to build muscle. So all those things taken into consideration, how much muscle can you actually build? All right. So within a year, somebody, obviously this is not including steroids, this is not including somebody who has gone through puberty. This is just considering, let's say, 20 years and older, right? So 20 and up, male, healthy, no steroids, lifts weights, eats well, sleeps good, has good genetic potential, follows a good program, they can build 10 to 12 pounds in a year. Now, for a female, remember, we got to cut that number in half. So that's 5 to 6 pounds in a year, assuming she is a beginner. You might even see about 8 pounds in some people, but that is pretty rare. So now this is somebody who is young. As we get older, those numbers decrease. So for a male, it might be 10 to 12 pounds if they're young. If they're older, it might be 5 to 6 pounds. I'm defining older above 50 to 60. So if you're a female above 60, how much muscle you're going to be able to build is going to be a lot less. So think 5 to 6 pounds or 2 to 3 pounds, depending on your age. And year after year, you're also going to be able to build less. So let's say your first year, you build 5 to 6 pounds. The next year, you might only build 2 to 4 pounds. The year after that, you might build only 1 to 2 pounds. And the year after that, you might stay at 1 or 2 pounds. The year after that, you might only build 1 pound. You can always build more muscle, but the amount you build is a lot less. Now, I'm giving you the time frame in the course of a year, but from a month to month perspective, it's not that big of a difference. So some people come to me after maybe 2 or 3 weeks of training and they're like, oh, my weight went up. I think I gained muscle. And it's just like, no, you either retained water or you've gained a little bit of fat. 9 times out of 10, they've just gained water and it's not that big of a deal. Right. But you don't build muscle that fast. Generally speaking, you can build about half a pound, a quarter of a pound, and if you've got great genetics, up to 1 pound per month. What we see in the literature is that in about 6 months, most women can gain about 2 pounds of muscle after cancer. I've seen upwards up to about 4, maybe 5 if somebody's has a really high genetic potential in about 6 months, but that's pretty rare. So what do you expect, or what should you expect? Anywhere between a quarter to 1 pound per month is great progress. So in 4 months, if you gain 1 pound of muscle, or in 6 months you gain 1 pound of muscle, That is incredible growth. That's really, really good growth. You're following a good program. Anytime you build muscle, that is good. So, any muscle you build at all, that's incredible progress for your overall health and well being. 1 or 2 pounds or a quarter of a pound doesn't sound like a big number, but physiologically speaking, that does a lot for your metabolism, for your hormone control, for your health, for your brain. Like it has tremendous impacts, even though quantitatively it doesn't sound like a big number. So, anytime you're able to build muscle, it's something to be excited about. Thinking like, oh man, in a year I can only build 4 pounds of muscle. That's the wrong way to look at it because if you build 4 pounds of muscle in a year, that is incredible progress for your overall health. Like your body literally just thanks you for that. It is tremendous for living longer and living healthier. We see that cancer survivors who have more muscle and are able to put on muscle and are able to maintain muscle have longer lifespans. So 4 pounds of muscle in a year is tremendous for your overall health and fitness and muscle function and quality of life. The more muscle, generally, the stronger. So, building muscle is extremely important, and it doesn't always have to be these big, build 10 pounds of muscle in 4 weeks. That's not true unless somebody's on steroids. So, that is the ugly truth about building muscle. That is the not so sexy truth about building muscle. But it's really, really important to still focus on building muscle, have a long term mindset when it comes to building muscle, follow the right approach, get an individualized plan. And lastly, if you want more information on how to build muscle, I'm going to put my muscle building guide below. So that way you have everything written out and you can check it in your email and you know exactly what to follow on a day to day basis so you can start building muscle again. I'm JC, clinical exercise physiologist and cancer exercise specialist. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments below and I'm always happy to help. Take care.